Good evening. If I can call the meeting to order, please. We are without an amplifier system, so we all have to use our big dog voices today and talk up nice and loud so that our one microphone, well, two, picks up everybody. So please talk good and loud today and use your outdoor voice. I'd like to call together the meeting for January 29th of the Building Board of Regulation Examiners and Appeals. Please remember to silence your cell phones if you haven't already, just so we don't be disturbed by those. Would you please call the roll?
Mr. Steele?
Here.
Mr. Straight?
Present.
Mr. Perdine is out. Miss O'Donnell? Present. Mr. Cowling?
Here.
Mr. Hickle?
Here.
Mr. McCann?
Here.
Mr. Edwards?
Here.
Mr. Feller?
Here.
Mr. Hawkinson is not. Mr. Fields is out. Mr. Logan is also out. Mr. McKee?
Here.
And Mr. Boney.
Here.
As for staff, Ross Knopfinger.
Here.
Mr. Thompson? And that is everyone.
That's everyone. In your packet, sitting in front of you is a seating chart, and you go about 4 pages down, you will find the agenda and an attachment of the Title 2305 Building Regulations sitting underneath that. We have an agenda there proposed. I will entertain
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Steele, excuse me.
I move for approval of the agenda as written.
Looking for a second?
A second.
Uh,
Mr. Cowan, second.
Mr. Collins seconds, thank you. Any notes or additions? Hearing none, we've got an agenda. Before us, we have a set of meeting minutes dated December 11th, 2014.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Steele.
I move for approval of the minutes as written.
Moved by Mr. Steele. Looking for a second?
I'll second.
Who's that?
Present.
Preston, thank you. Second by Mr. McKee. Any additions, changes to the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any withstanding? Passed unanimously.
I wasn't here.
Okay, got one abstention from Mr. Hickle, who was not at that meeting. Thank you. So we do have approved minutes. Appearance request for public hearing. Will you be testifying directly related to 2310? Sir?
Yeah, I have just a couple specific things, yes.
If it's related directly to that, we'll deal with it at that time I press. Yes.
Give me real quick, these gentlemen can go on to what's 2310, 104, 103, 104, the permit exemptions.
Could you say that louder?
2310 102.
On page 20, 25.
2310-10424.
10424, plumbing permit exemption.
Yes. Yes, to section
Yes,
We'd like to eliminate that whole section.
is that what you're here to discuss?
Yes.
That one? So, understand, instead of taking it piecemeal, if I may, if we can get the whole thing started in a little bit, and then we'll push that to the front of it.
Process, but these gentlemen are good enough to show up.
Yes, but I would like to give Mr. Thompson an opportunity to briefly present this thing to us before we
Thank you.
tear into a specific line item inside. That being said, either Mr. Thompson or Mr. Nossinger, would you like to make a presentation on what is before us?
I just want to say one thing real fast is, I mentioned at the last meeting that we would be putting forward the fees if all three agencies that we contact were in favor of a fee increase or a fee decrease, whatever you may call it, it's kind of a combination of both. We received a positive recommendation from AGC, a positive recommendation from AHBA, and a negative recommendation from ABC. So in talking with the 8th floor today, we decided to not put the fees forward because of exactly what we had said before, which was unless we have a unanimous approval of all the main agencies that permit, we would not go forward. So the fees in the administrative code will go forward exactly as they are as in today. So no changes will be made to the fees as of this submittal. So if you look at everything in the back of the fees that wasn't changed, it just goes back to the original wording. There will be no fee increase or fee decrease based upon the moving forward. And with that, we've agreed also to sit down and form a group of agency members, ABC members, and AHBA members, just to look at all the entire, not just the fees, but the entire operation and process for building safety over the course of the next 6-8 months. And then, at the end of that, if that group together decides we may or may not need any changes, we'll bring forward changes at that point in time. So hopefully that doesn't confuse you or anything. We're just, the fees will not be changed in any manner as per what is in place today in the 2009 code. So this will just go forward as already existing code, if that makes sense.
Ms. O'Donnell,
Mr. Thompson, through the chair.
good and loud.
Is there a format of the document presented as you've described available to view, or
Just give what's in black.
it's what's in black? And
Well, everything goes back to what it is in red. Is that correct? Yeah, correct. All the current fees are shown in red.
current is in red.
If the current is in red,
Oh, sorry.
so all of the places where it had changed in the red go back to what is already sitting there in black. That makes sense.
No,
No, it didn't.
sorry, it doesn't.
That's something I wanted to speak up.
For example, this is random.
No, this is very simple. All the existing fees are in red. So just look at any fee table, any number you see in red is the existing fee.
I heard Mr. Thompson say the counter that.
So for example, and let's just take table 3A.
What page are you on, please?
It's 51.
51?
So like in line 2, page 51 of 60, line 2 in table 3A, in red it's .015. The proposed, initially we were thinking of going as .0158, but it's going back and staying at the .015, which is in red. So everything in red is what it goes, which is exactly what's in code today and present in the 2009 code, will go forward in this 2012.
So to clarify my question, Mr. Thompson, that pertains to the fees. However, the other changes in red in the document are actual changes to the document, correct?
Correct.
No, they're not. All the red text just clarifies what it changed.
Clarification.
Okay,
That's explained on the very first page.
I saw that, but
Now, that being said, what happens to table 3E? It's marked A and B on the bottom. I assume it's supposed to be D and E. This is new language. This is on the very top of page 55.
it doesn't make sense to me.
So there, we would propose to,
They're saying right next to the top, that we highlighted all the proposed changes in red. It doesn't say we're gonna not use them.
What it's saying is the red text is used to clarify proposed changes. It's confusing because in some spots they haven't.
Right, because he's saying that we're really not gonna do it, we're gonna keep the black text.
Go ahead, to answer what the question was again on that.
The question is on the top of page 55, you have added two new sections there. They're at the very end of table 3E. Repair and replacement of heating appliances, times 2 there. Is that coming out then, since that's all red?
the red stuff is coming out, correct? And what we're proposing as new is written in black in the table 3E. And basically, if you notice, if you look at the numbers in the table, those fees didn't change. I mean, in the sense that a retro permit is still either $75 or $150. If anything, we actually decreased electrical retro permits for certain limited scopes of work from $150 to $75. Okay? And water heaters in buildings that contain 4 or fewer dwelling units. That'd be a $75 retro versus today that's $150 retro. So I think we would like to propose that we go with this new retro permit format because it's a benefit to both the electrical and plumbing industry.
Miss-
54.
Mr. Steele?
Mr. Chairman, I read through this document before coming here tonight, and I'm a bit more confused after hearing a lot of this discussions. I take exception that the red text is not a consistent use throughout the document, and one needs to read each of the red text. Some is clarification, some is replacement language. I think the meat of it is relative to the fees, if we could get confirmation that the red fees are all existing, and that's what's being proposed, that would add some weight. But maybe the easiest way to deal with this is just saying in an approval that we don't change fees and don't worry about what's stated in the document, so we don't get hung up with that.
Well, basically, what I'm thinking, hearing here is basically if we take off any changes to any of the table 3s, then
We're back to where we were.
Then we're back to where we were.
And I think that's what Mr. Thompson and Mr. Nossinger are saying.
Now, are there any fees buried in the body of the text? And I thought I saw one a moment ago.
Why can't this be 3 colors?
There should be no fees up in the body of the code. This goes back to, remember,
Just
last
filing
week,
fees.
why we use the DOM.
Page 20.
Provides a document with all these different changes in there, but the board requested that, in this case only. And so it is what it is, but the other reason is, today was the change in the fees. And what we're trying to say is there's not one fee that will go up or change with respect to what's going through today. And what Ross tried to do with the red
So if we look at this body here for red and black text, with the exception of the tables starting on page 51, tables 3A through 3N, then we can be looking at both. 3A through 3N will be no changes. Okay. Do you have more presentation you'd like to go to beyond that?
I have one question related to that. Okay.
Well, let's just look at the first page on page 2. Section 2305.030, applicability of service areas, was completely rewritten. The red text below describes how it used to be. Consistently through this document, when you see red text, that's what it's doing.
Well, if you look at page 5, Mr. Nossinger, under 2310-101-82, you've got a clarification at the end that says new language in red, but it doesn't follow the example that the red is old.
So there's a handful of those in there?
Yeah, I'm just
Where
saying,
I thought, right, that was the most simple way just to do that without,
right, I'm just saying everyone needs to read it so they know what it's doing.
there's directions on each change.
Yeah,
It's not, excuse me,
Ms. O'Donnell?
sorry, Mr. Knopfinger, Mr. Thompson, through the chair. In some cases, it's saying that the red is the change, or clarifying a change. In some cases, you're saying that the red is not going to change, we're gonna stay with the black, which was the original,
You gotta read each one.
especially in the fees. So if you go to the fee table and you look at, for example, table 3E, retrofit permits, are you saying then that you're not going to go forward with the changes, the proposed changes of the retrofit permits? Is the red the old text? The red is the old text.
What I would recommend to the board is to, at the end of the day, basically, if you're happy with the document, you would recommend a motion to approve the document, except for all the fee changes, minus this retrofit table. I think you want to approve the fee changes in this retrofit table 3E.
Yeah,
The reason
and that's the
Table 3E
confusing
was
part of it.
created was to simplify and make permits available online for less price and everything. So that is a very positive step and move forward in the fee. The problem ends up being is how this document is written, how to explain it to you. Really, every red language is self-explanatory for that section. So read it just for that. If you read 2 weeks, you've had this for a couple weeks, those are specific. Everything in the fee tables in the back, if there's a fee change, it is not going to take place, except we're endorsing table 3E, but that's up to you. If you want to change and accept 3E because it is a single decrease in fee cost and a simplification for people to buy permits online and match our online system, then you can accept table 3E. That's the only one that's kind of different with regard to this red in the document. So hopefully that helps.
I think that's very clear, and you have my 100% support on that particular issue. I think that's a good issue. I think it's a good change. I think it encourages compliance in the field. It encourages people to want to do things the right way, which is what we want. I just think that it's difficult to understand when we've got two colors being used, and sometimes they mean one thing, sometimes they mean another, and you've got to use your powers of deduction and discernment.
I think you're mistaken, ma'am, and I'd like to speak to that, if you give me a chance.
I would like to allow the staff to.
It's a procedure, so.
If you remember in the last building board meeting, you guys asked for this clarification
Yes.
in mixed.
Yes.
I mean, we could have printed it in black, but red kind of stands out a little bit different. in the
I
change.
appreciate
So
it.
we tried to do that. If it made it more difficult, I think it's actually fairly clear, but
agree.
will help out and make things at least 50% cheaper than what it has been currently right now today. At least for the Table 3E, Section A.
I think that what you're saying, what I'm hearing is that we agree that that is a good section. I wholly agree with that. I think what's confusing is that, and I know there's more than two colors, red and black, but a clear statement that no building permit fees will be changed from the previous code. That statement alone in green above each table would make it extremely clear that there's no fiddling around with confusion.
We can't fiddle around.
We're arguing over little procedure stuff. Let's move on to
We agree with,
the
we agree
technical
with you.
stuff.
That will happen. I mean, we can run it by, I mean, you'll be able to compare exactly later. I mean, no, that's what we do. We do what you guys tell us to do at the end of the day.
Mr. Knopfler and Mr. Thompson, are there significant things within this body other than the minor cleanups that you would like to bring to the attention of the board?
Well, I was hoping you guys would read it and then raise specific questions.
I'm sure some of these individuals do. I just want to give you the opportunity before I turn the wolves loose. Do we have questions for our staff on
I
this?
can tell you the changes that were made were all to try to clarify based on things that have happened since the last code was adopted. That's really the basis of any change. If you have any questions specific to those, we can go into those. There's not a huge amount of changes, but there's different wordings, different changes that were trying to be made to help clarify us as an agency or that the industry asked us to make. So it's kind of a, and in most cases, Ross can kind of talk about this. At the last board meeting, they asked if there was a committee formed to go through this. And I think Ross, he didn't make that meeting, but I think he can make a comment that I believe all of the changes that were made by that committee are in here, and most of those are these changes that are in this code, not created or changed by any one entity like the building department. I believe Ross was part of that committee, and I think Serena was, and I don't know who else on the board was, but I believe Ross probably can answer that better because I wasn't part of that committee before I was here. But I believe that those changes were incorporated.
Yeah, many of those changes were. I think one of the most significant things for the building board was the whole issue of three-member hearing panels. We actually have a subcommittee of building board members that recommended that we throw out the three-member hearing panels. That was not done. They're still in here. Okay. The language has been cleaned up a little bit about the panels and the process, but it's still the panels in the same process, no significant overall change from the current status of the board.
There was one major change in this that makes it a little bit more palatable. The reason why the small member group threw that section out is at that time it was under the understanding we needed the full process for advertising and then anybody could appeal. So there was absolutely no reason to, it didn't speed the process up. Since that time, there's been a different interpretation that we can go to a shorter notification, so we can do like a, what is it?
48 to 24 hours.
Just, 1 to 2 day notice, and then meet with the small board and the 3-member board before it goes to big notification to the big board. So there's been that change in policy that is why the appeals stayed in after the committee met and recommended deletion of that. Did that clarify anything? I don't see hands popping up, so okay, good. And that's what I was hoping you'd have a chance to respond to a little bit as a significant change. Other questions for the building department from the board?
I'm curious if the driving force is going back.
What was the question, please?
The driving force and driving, going back on the fee schedule was
Mr. Cullen.
Objection.
The ABC objections were, they sent a table that they calculated up the fee changes, but, I think there needs to be some education with regard to how the fees are calculated, because they had said that the commercial was going to take the brunt of the increase, but the information that they provided was flawed in the sense that new building commercial inspection doesn't pay inspections on top of the building permit fee. They had told and went through their board and said that they did have to pay extra for inspections, and they don't. And the other reason was residential does not, because they get their 23 inspections, and they calculated the inspections on residential all at the $150 level. But when we went through and set up the fees for residential, most inspections are houses like almost side by side, so they're like 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there, 10 minutes there. So they're not really full 23 hourly, full hour inspections. Therefore, you can't calculate that as $150 and say that they pay less. So, I mean, but in agreement, I mean, I'm not really opposed to the denial of it, especially with all three panels, all three groups wanting to assemble a team and a membership group and kind of a task force to look at building safety in general and see if we can find other ways to speed things up, find other ways. And then at the end, if that's the determination, we'll go back forward with it. But at this time, I think it's a good thing to step back, get those groups together, get everybody to understand our operation. Because the other thing is, we're a little bit different in the way we set our fees. The fees typically come out of the national standard. That national standard has been going up very small, like 1 or 2%. But our wages for the city, based on collective bargaining, went up 10%. So if they went up 10% and the national has only went up 1, 2%, 3%, there's a big gap there with regard to how much we collect in fees to cover and do the same service that we used to be able to do, if that makes sense to you. So it's in the government scenario and how we do our budgeting and setup and fee structure, it's a little bit different than the private sector. And, you know, so in this case, I think I got to do a better job of explaining to those groups, even though 2 groups did approve and 1 didn't. I mean, it's our job to explain to them exactly how it goes. Then we can all come together as an industry and say, let's do this and let's do it the right way. So I'm not worried about the fee increase per se as being a problem. I think it's better that we take that back and we get together and we regroup, we get the industry involved, and we solve a way of moving forward that makes a little bit more sense. And we need to be a part of working with the industry and not have this perception that we're the negative part of it.
I take it your fees are not cutting your expense.
Well, in the municipal structure, building department has its own building safety fund. So whatever we collect stays in the building department for the most part, which means if we make money, we keep it, it lapses, it stays in the fund and covers the time in the lean years. Like, say you have a big year of permitting, and then all the permitting drops difficult process and complex, but that's why I say, it's not bad to get a group together and we explain it to them, and then they'll be able to go back to their agencies and kind of make a little bit more sense of why and when we need fees to be able to meet the goals of the industry.
When you're already funded, who bails?
The municipality bails us out and makes a loan. So we're paying back, this building safety reserve fund is negative. We are paying interest on that loan to the municipality of Anchorage, if that makes sense. So in the better years where we're kind of on that building up again, you get back and you try to pay back that loan, and you're paying interest each to the municipality in a different loan scenario. So they always track that fund. Right now, like I said, it's $3 million plus interest each year until we pay that off, and then if we can build that fund up and hopefully never go back into the negative, then we sit in a better place. And so that's, at the end of the day, I don't know what that figure is. I know we did make money at the end of last year, but I don't know what that number will be for probably another 30 days.
I have a question.
Mr. Cullen?
Just out of curiosity, what is the typical yearly intake that we?
I believe this past year, somewhere between $6.5 and $8 million, I think, was the revenue for building safety.
So we went from 6+ to 3- in how many years?
No, it's been,
A long period.
over a period of time. Yeah. No, it was 6+. I mean, there was some, we bought years ago when we were 6+, we bought the permitting system, we bought different things, and then, there's some funds that were taken for some other things that paid off different, I don't exactly know, it's kind of outside of my realm. But yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, it got negative. It went to the negative because we still had to have staff, and it lost some money for a few years, so it got down below, and it's just now building back up. So it was as low as like $6 million negative, so now it's $3 million negative, and maybe, it's 2 or 1. I don't know exactly after this last year, but I mean, it really varies up and down, and when the building department, you got people, you just can't lay off all your inspectors when you collected the fees the year before to do all the permitting. You have to still be able to inspect them, so you still have those salaries to pay, and you keep them on. But, I mean, with the measurements that we have now, we're able to go up and down on staff a little bit easier with regard to that. But right now, we're just trying to build our fund back up to where we don't owe the municipality the parent.
Unless I hear objections, I'd like to give these gentlemen an opportunity here to speak for what they're here for. If you may. Please state your name, and if you're representing yourself or a company or organization, state so, please.
Well, my name's Larry Lorenzo, and I'm the owner of a plumbing company and have been for 30 years.
Speak up.
Want me up here?
Well, I don't have a microphone. I just got to be able to
My
hear
name's
you.
Larry Lorenzo. I'm the owner of Lorenzo Enterprises. I've been plumbing in Anchorage for 30 years. I have two things to talk about. One is Table 3D, 2310, Table 3D, and 3E, which you were discussing a minute ago. Now, I can tell you that I pull a lot of permits, and I do it online, which Ron was talking about. If I'm reading this correctly, the statement number 4 in Table 3E, retrofit permits, it says the like-for-like replacement of a water heater in a residential building containing 4 or fewer dwellings. If that is correct, then for the last 2 years, I've been being charged $150 for residential water heater permits, which the cost to a customer for me to actually do that installation is about between $200 and $300 on the average, and then we have to in turn charge them $150 for a permit, which seems excessive. If it was $75 like this is stating here, I would accept that, but it hasn't been $75, it's been $150. That's what I'm charged online at the municipality of Anchorage when I pull a permit. So I need that clarified, Ron, because that's what they've been charging us.
That's exactly right. That's what we're changing, why we endorse this as being better, because it will be a benefit.
So Because at $150, when we pull a permit to put in a faucet for somebody, they go to a store maybe, Home Depot, Lowe's, and they buy a $100 faucet, then they call up a plumber, and hey, I need to have you put my faucet in, and we say, okay, we'll come out there, it's gonna take about an hour, we charge $110 an hour, but guess what, we've gotta charge you $150 for a permit. Doesn't that seem a little excessive? That's what I'd have to charge you, man. You know, anybody sitting up here, you want a water heater put in, it's a couple $100 to get it installed and $150 for the permit. That seems excessive, but 75 seems pretty reasonable, so I'm in agreement with that. That's what I wanted to say on that. Secondly, this is kind of go back to page 25. On page 25 now, it kind of might sound like I'm shooting myself in the foot because on one hand, I don't want to have a customer have to pay $150 for a permit when I'm putting in only a sink or a hose bib or a faucet. That seems crazy. But there is something that's written in here that would be, it's kind of a health and safety thing. A shower faucet requires a setting of that faucet to stay by code 120 degrees, no higher than 120, no lower than 110. That requires a licensed plumber, somebody that knows what they're doing to install that bathroom, that shower faucet, so we don't have people get scalded. And I've been in a case once where somebody was scalded and it was quite bad. So I hate to see a shower faucet be included in that. Yet at the same time, like I said, out of health and safety, I don't want to see that one included, but I would like to see the rest of them included because a $75 permit for that, or no permit at all, is reasonable. You know, no permit to have to put in somebody's hose bib on the outside. That's ridiculous, so we'd have to pay a $150 permit for that. But I'd like you to maybe take a thought about possibly removing just the shower or that whole section C of that. So that's what I wanted to talk about.
Ms. O'Donnell.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Larry Lorenzo.
Mr. Lorenzo, I happen to agree with you on part of this. I think it's safe and pretty straightforward if you're going to replace a sink or a lab. But a shower valve is something different. A drinking fountain, frankly, is commercial. You don't find a lot of drinking fountains in residential homes.
Yeah, you're not going to find them much in residential.
And
That's
I don't
all gonna
think
be
that should be included in there at all, because if you're replacing a drinking fountain, there's probably a good reason for it, and it probably is because it's too high, which means it wouldn't meet ADA. And I don't think that should be included in that section either.
I would agree. I would agree with you on the drinking fountain and the shower. I think those two items might want to be removed. You know, a sink, a lavatory, a toilet, a faucet. Yeah, I don't think they need to. There's no reason for a permit to be pulled on them. And what happens is people won't, you know, they just won't buy the permit. They won't have a licensed plumber do it. They'll get a handyman to do it because they're not going to pay that $150 for a permit. Or even $75 if that was included in that other place where it's not. Only water heater is that exception. But I do think that the drinking fountain needs to be at the correct level like you talk about. That's a health and safety thing. People that are in wheelchairs, you know, some of the fountains are lower. They need to be installed at a correct level. Same way with the shower faucet. That can scald somebody really bad and kill them or really maim them. I don't think we should have, if we require a permit on that, we're not going to get all of them, but maybe we get a few of them and maybe we save one person from getting scalded because the licensed plumber did that. You know, rather than a handyman that didn't know better.
Mr. Steele.
Mr. Lorenzo, I'll use your comments and the interaction with Mr. Thompson to try to delve into this red-black permit, no permit question. If I understand your testimony, you're advocating that the retrofit permit fees be changed. Is that correct?
Correct. If it is going down to 75, if that's what I see,
Now,
that's great.
and I may be naive here, but I'm reading table 2310 in the black, and it doesn't speak to permit fees, it speaks to $75 per inspection and $150 per inspection per hour, and the same for the backflow preventer, but I don't see anything speaking to permit. Is it a nuance that I'm
This
missing?
is where the confusion was.
Pardon?
That's the only fee.
So,
Inspection.
the use of the term permit is incorrect.
Permit fee is kind of,
Permit fee is just a $75 inspection fee, that's,
Thank you.
so there's not a separate fee on top.
That clarified it, thank you.
Good, I was lost here too, thank you. Yes, sir. Mr. McCain.
The problem here is the language in C of 104, 2.4. The way this is going to be perceived is that, the way I perceive it as a 40-year plumbing contractor in this town, in this state, is that they'll say, okay, the Millennium is just doing a remodel now. This language says they don't have to pull a permit for anything. This looks at it like we don't have to pull a permit for shower, drinking fountain, hose bits, nothing. There's no amount of fixtures involved in this. That's why I want to eliminate this, and I agree. We have to have people get together that are in this. I hope you appreciate what I'm saying.
I see what you're saying, but nobody gets permits for these, that's why they're in.
Well, when you do a commercial building or something, or a remodel, where you have a vault, where you can have 220 toilets, 200 from there's only stuff that you can run through the kids and money. Why was that?
That is covered under alteration permit, and you pay $75 or $150 per inspection on your entire permit for all of the inspections that you're gonna do on that facility.
This is still, it is a license to be, well, no, the language is quite clear. It's the replacement of a hose bib doesn't require a permit. If you install a new hose bib, that requires a permit. It's the replacement of a sink. You got a sink in there.
Unscrewing one and screwing one back in.
Yeah, when you don't have to do any piping work. You don't have to do any operation. Totally understand. In the shower valve.
We can agree with the shower valve.
See, that's why there's things that we can protect. So that's why I would recommend, if we're going to move forward with this, is just to eliminate C totally out of the text
Ms. O'Donnell?
until we review it again.
I do agree, Mr. McCann, through the chair, that I think it should be reviewed. What I run into is encouraging commercial property owners, because that's what I deal in mostly, when they want to revise or update their toilet rooms, etc. We want to do it right, we want to get a permit, etc. And we'll quote it as such. And, oh, it's too expensive, they'll get their handyman to do it. And so no permits are pulled, nobody's inspecting it, no licensed plumbers doing the work. And that's what we run into. And so I think the goal was, like we used to have small electrical project permits, I'm sorry if I'm not projecting.
Well, I thought that the electrical would turn on. I have hearing aids.
There used to be small electrical project permits where you would be able to go in and get they started out at $46, and I bought 20 of them, and then they went up to 75. And anyway, you could do up to 6 openings, 1 circuit, and be in compliance and get it inspected. And then they did away with that entirely because it didn't agree with the computer program. And so then you were obligated to get a full-blown electrical permit or a retro permit.
Over a certain amount.
No, not for everything.
Really?
Yes. And so the objective was to increase compliance, because then they wouldn't get a permit. They would not pay for a permit for somebody to come in and put in 4 outlets. They'd have somebody who's not qualified do it.
That's it.
And it's exactly the problem. And so to have a less expensive permit available that you can sell to your customer and have them be in compliance and have a licensed person do the work is the objective, to have this sort of section in there. I agree with the limit. I agree a hotel shouldn't be able to do, 500 rooms without a permit. I think that's wrong.
This is how it's going to be perceived, not stop you.
Yeah.
There's the language that has to be right, just like the red and the black stuff that were confused.
Yep,
I
yep.
totally,
Yes.
and then I had overheard that, okay, the fees were not going to change, which I passed along, when in fact they are going to change for retrofit. So it's the language in here that's going to be, that the handymen are going to eat this up.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I'd like to remove section C out of this total until to a later date, we can review it.
Mr. Steele.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we're starting to get into maybe deliberating and debating points, and I'd suggest we maybe hear the testimony and answer questions, and then make a motion before us, and then we can start deliberating specific points.
I fully concur. I'm glad you went there. Did you have any more questions?
No, that was it, and I appreciate you hearing me, and now you got something to think about, at least on that. Thanks, Ron, for clarifying that permit thing. That's definitely gonna help. I think we'll have, you'll see more people in compliance when the fee is reasonable than you would when the fee is so exorbitant that people just say, I'll get my brother to do it, or my handyman to do it, or whatever, so. Thanks for listening, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, did you have a testimony as well?
I don't know if it's a place to bring it up or not, but
Sir, please state your name.
Jeff Hansen, Viking Plumbing, been plumbing for 40 years. I feel like it takes a lot of work to get these licenses, to go to a lot of schooling, and I feel like we're qualified to do the work we're doing. Now, I have to plumb in California for about 10 years, from 86 to 89, I had a license there too. And we set up a program down there that you came in and you have a license to be a plumbing contractor, and any contractor that had a license to be a contractor could go buy a stack of water heater permits, replacement. We didn't need an inspection. They did a 5% across the board inspection. They cut the fees by half, and they sold 10 times more permits. So the way I look at it, between water heaters, boilers, shower valves, come up with a fee and let the guys go down to this licensed contractors, do a 5% across the board check. If the contractor only installed to code, then he jerks that, he can get that removed from him. And they sold a lot more. I was thinking of go down and check with all the boilers that get sold in this town, all the water heaters, and go match it up with their permits down there. I guarantee you they ain't half of them. But to me, if you can, without having to call it up and get an inspection and do all this stuff, you go down and buy 10 permits or 40 permits, keep them in your truck, you go put your boiler in, you write across there your name, the contractor name, rip one stick off, send it to the city, they know a new boiler went into that house. Instead of charging $150 for a boiler replacement, charge $75. You don't have to send the guy out, you take care of your own work. That's, I don't know if it's the right.
Selective
A
inspection.
lot of what he's talking about is why we're trying to lower this fee. We understand it's too high. That was the first thing when I came in 8 months ago. I said, why are we not getting any of these permits? It went down from some huge amount of revenue to nothing because they jumped that price up. Same thing in those electrical small permits. Those are two things that we do need to work on. This is a step in that right direction, but yet we have to, we have to deal with it. And I agree 100%.
tons of sense to me. Again, to reiterate that is, using the new electronic system, you'd never be able to go down and buy a stack of them, because it's got to go in a customer's name. But you could buy one of them at, say, that $75 price, or you could, and for each customer that you do. Yet, it seems foolish that they have to, because we are licensed, you know, we have 5 different licenses to plumb in this state. I mean, and plus bonded insurance and all of that. I mean, for Christ's sakes, how much do we have to have? And then we still have to have somebody come behind us and check every install that we do on every water heater or every faucet? That's crazy. If you could get down to where you were expecting, he said 5%, I think maybe 10 or 15%. Every third permit you pulled had to be inspected. Well, then that relieves his people from being out in the field. They can be somewhere else doing the job. Yet you're doing enough of a spot check to keep us honest. You know, better do it right, because we don't know which one they're going to do. That would have to be a money-making situation for you. That would have to change things around big time because right now on every one of these little $75, $150 permits, retros that we pull, you guys don't understand that. They have to send out an inspector on every one of them. Every one. And that's time-consuming and costly. That's why they want $150, because it's expensive. Hell, they charge more than we do to go out and do the job in some cases. So,
Well, you can't sell it.
you know, wouldn't it be nice if we use some common sense? And that's common sense, is to inspect a percentage of them. Not everyone. We're already licensed. And the guys that aren't pulling permits, and the ones that are doing, like you talked about, we're not going to get them anyway unless we catch them out in the field. You know, unless an inspector catches them or we turn them in or something like that. We'll never catch them. We never have. And I don't care if you put 10 enforcement officers on, you're never going to catch that guy that's out there in, you know, somebody's house putting in a faucet, because how can you beat him? You just can't. But you
Any
can
more
at least
questions
get
for our
honest
two
guys
guests?
like us a fair shake against those guys that aren't doing it and don't have our prices so high that you price us out of business.
We'll make a commitment when we get this group meeting to discuss that exact topic and see if we can enhance some of those programs. But because we do, and me and Ross have talked about this a lot, we both are in agreement with what you're talking about here. It's just how we get there and how fast we can get there. It might just take a little bit of time, but I think we can get closer to what you're talking about.
Well, I think we've gotten a lot better, by the way, over the 30 years that I've done. The new electronic system that they finally got in place on the retrofits is working really good. I really like that. So thank you for letting me talk. I appreciate it. I know we kind of did it backwards, and I really do appreciate you letting us come in and talk. That's very nice.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Other questions for the staff?
Mr. Boney.
Mr. Donovan?
Mr. Thompson, Mr. Knopfinger, I have a question regarding page 57 of 60. I've gone through and I've looked at the fees in red, the fees in black versus the current code, and there seems to be a discrepancy. For example, table 3J, 3 and 4, red is what we're keeping, and black is what we're not keeping, correct?
Well, now, correct, yeah, you're gonna be keeping the right piece.
So the red piece is actually a reduction.
I mean, all we're saying is exactly what you were wanting to say. No matter what, we will go back to the existing fee. And in most of these, it's lower, but there are some that the old fee is higher.
Just conditional.
In this case,
In this case, you're right. So, I think it's better for you to adopt it with a statement saying all of the fees except in table 3E revert back to what's present today. Like you were saying ahead of each one, so I think you're right. I mean, we try to do our best with making sure one way or the other, but it looks like they got what we on that table.
to refer down then further to table 3L,
So it'll go back to 130, so it is possible. It will go back to be cheaper.
so,
Is that what you were asking?
yeah, because it's not,
It'll go back to
Yeah.
130 per hour rather than 150?
correct. If you go to table 3L, both of the numbers are different than what is on the current, and I don't understand that.
Say that again?
Both of the numbers, the black number and the red number, are different than what is on the existing code.
Where did you get your existing code?
We were working on.
The on-site fees changed, just this last year. And if you got them off the municipal website, they're not up to date yet.
Okay.
Okay.
They take about 6 months to get updated onto the municipal code site, everything.
So what we're saying then on, for example, on 3L, sorry, I lost my spot. The current cost is the 526, or is it the 530?
The current cost is $526.
Okay, and then,
For B, the current cost is $268.50. And basically, we're just rounding those numbers.
Mhm.
They were some goofy numbers.
yeah, they are. I mean, and the same thing I found on, continuing down that page. Nothing seemed to match up, and so it's probably the delay in the updating on the website. And so if that were clarified,
It'll just go back to what it is presently that's adopted by the English Assembly. That might be the language you use. It reverts back to exactly what's in code today as adopted by the Assembly.
Mr. McCain?
I'd like to make a motion that we're under Robert Rules Board here, that we give these gentlemen the opportunity to clean up the language, to clean up everything. We're taking up our precious time here. If this is as clear as mud, I'm very disappointed in all of this.
You guys asked for this type of document. We provided it without that. You guys asked for this. We did exactly what we were asking for.
Well, Dave, it's as clear as mud. It really is. The way it's presented, the red, the black. Okay, everything goes back to what it was, except for this, this section.
Everything goes back except
So
for.
then I want to make a motion that we give these gentlemen an opportunity to clear this up. And then we'll meet again and after that, they have the opportunity. When he says that we asked him to review this and bring it to us, what did we ask him at the last meeting? That he tried to push through without us seeing any of it. Correct? And I want to make a motion that we give them the opportunity to where they can clean this up, because it's not right.
Is there a second on this motion?
I would make a second on the motion if it were to add a stipulation that if a fee is not going to change, that it not be shown. It just stays the same as what it is.
For the way that we do the codes, we
Excuse me, point of
adopt
order. Point of order, we have a motion that we have to act on here.
Thank you.
I was working on the second here.
I think in the Robert's Rule of Order, she seconded what I proposed.
She was
That we
amending,
give them the opportunity,
she
or
was
she's
amending
speaking
it.
to
So you need to agree to what she states as an amendment to the motion.
No, she is, Robert's Rule of Order, she has agreed to second my motion that I directed to the chair.
Are you seconding his motion?
I would second his motion to make it a more clear document.
Excuse me, you have to either stop right there, or it's not a second.
It's a yes or no. Are you seconding his motion?
Yes.
Okay, we got a second.
Let's go.
Mr. Chairman,
Let's move on.
Mr. Steele?
I would like to propose a substitute motion, and that substitute motion is that we approve Chapter 2305 as submitted, with the exception of tables 2310, Table 3A through 3M, with the exception of Table 3E. The intent is it remains as currently exists. And the second change would be on page 20, that in 2310-104.2.4, item C, the word shower valve be removed.
Let me get caught up there on that one. What page is that in?
That's on 25 of 60, on item 2310, 104.2.4, C, and in the first sentence, it strikes the word shower valve. And that's the end of the motion. Substitute motion.
I second that.
Moved by Mr. Steele, second by Mr. Cowling.
If I may, at this point, we're only acting on if we substitute this as a motion, so I suggest we vote on that.
Discussions, would you like to present your motion any further?
No, I think it's pretty self-evident that I'm suggesting this is a substitute motion.
Mr. McCain?
Under Robert's Rules of Order, it was already seconded that we give this gentleman the opportunity to clean it all up. Under the Robert's Rules of Order, you can't have a second. You can't have a, what did you call it?
I made a motion for a substitute, and what Robert's
Which is-
Rule of Order
which
says
does allow.
is that everyone stop action on your motion. There's now this motion suggesting that this be substituted for your motion. It's voted up or down. If it's voted up, your motion is dead. This is then the motion before us.
You're correct on one part, is that you can make the motion to have that motion, but you had to have a second on the motion that you're proposing, which I did not hear. So-
Mr. Cowan did.
Mr. Cowling, second.
Okay, I did not hear that. Sorry. And we need to have the speakers turned on. Is there a possibility of having them turned on?
Unfortunately, it
is.
is broken.
Oh, okay.
We tried both systems and they are not up and running. I called IT and obviously they're not calling me back and
You can't even, I have hearing aids, so, I mean, what's the sense of having a meeting if you can't hear what's being proposed?
Well, people are
I
not
apologize, I
speaking.
did not hear the motion second.
We're not speaking. I second the motion.
Well, thank you. And you seconded what, sir? What was it that you seconded?
This motion,
And what was the motion, sir?
Do you want me to read it back to you, sir?
Please, please.
The motion was to approve Chapter 23,
Okay, just a second. Let's vote, okay. And give the page number, please.
excuse me, if you want to listen to my motion, come over here.
No, I think you'll come over here, sir.
Please, let's be civil about this. Tempers
Is
are
how
getting
this
high.
work here? Okay, I know that I'm new to this system, but if you can't hear the motion, and we're not going on Robert's Rules of Order, I want to get along with everybody here. But this is not acceptable at all. We have something that's as clear as mud that they're trying to talk through. And let's give them the opportunity to clean it up.
Mr. Steele?
Mr. Chairman, again, we're speaking to a motion that's not before us. I would suggest we act on the substitute motion. If everyone agrees that we need to not be speaking about it, fine. Otherwise, let's move on with business.
Is there discussion regarding Mr. Steele's motion? Mr. Feller?
Yeah, I understand Mr. Steele's motion, and I think that accomplishes what most
Can you speak
people
up, please?
want. I understand Mr. Steele's motion, and I think that accomplishes what most of us, or what I want out of this. And so I think it is clear to me, and we kind of went through this the last meeting, kind of wasted a meeting and didn't get anywhere, and I don't want to waste another meeting and not, produce something, get something through. So I will be supporting Mr. Steele's motion.
Other discussion?
Did you?
Based on this one, I think I would like to call the vote by roll call on this one, please. Sure? You had a question? Ms. O'Donnell?
The tables that Mr. Steele were,
Nice and loud. Everybody's got to hear it.
I hear you.
the tables that Mr. Steele were excluding were identified as tables 3A, correct?
Do you want me to repeat?
Would you
My
please?
intent is all of the tables are excluded with the exception,
I.e., we will keep
we will keep
There you
the
go.
fees that exist, maybe not on your document, but on the published website, or not the website, the published,
Keep going.
the approved, all of those stay as is with the exception of 3E, which is retrofit permit fees, and that those would be revised per the language proposed.
That's what I understand too, so.
The next item was on page 25 of 60, and on page 25 of 60, in 2310, 104.2.4, plumbing permit exceptions, item C, first sentence, the word shower valve is deleted.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
I'd like to make a comment.
Excuse me, we need to vote on whether this is a substitute or not, and then we can start deliberation.
You're right. That is correct. Okay, so we got the substitute motion before us. By roll, please.
Mr. Cowling,
Yes.
Mr. Straight,
Yes.
Mr. McCann,
Yes.
Mr. Feller,
Yes.
Mr. Hickle,
Yes.
Ms. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Steele,
Yes.
Mr. McKee,
Yes.
and Mr. Boone.
Yes,
Unanimous.
thank you. Okay, we now have a substitute motion before us. Now we can discuss and deliberate a little bit.
If I may speak to the motion?
Oh, I'm
Oh.
sorry, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for that. Mr. Steele.
Speaking to the motion, I know this is frustrating, and I want to start off by saying I'm not trying to be hostile to anyone in this. I'm just trying to move business forward and not have to meet again. And I think that I did read through the document, and yes, the use of red and yellow is a bit confusing, but I made my way through it. And I think we've touched on modifying points that are important relative to community support when it gets to the assembly level, which relates to fees. And to date, I think the only issue that has been a concern is really the scalding that may occur with the shower valve. And by eliminating that, I think we get to a document that I can support, and hopefully the rest of us can. And so I'll be supporting the motion.
Other comments? Mr. Feller, excuse me.
So, Mr. McCain, you were not at the last meeting, correct?
Yes, I was, sir.
Oh, you were. So
The
at the last,
documents show I was there.
okay. So someone asked what we asked staff, and what I remember that we asked them is we asked them to track the changes. And they attempted to do that, and, you know, if you read through it, it's a little bit inconsistent, but as Mr. Steele said, you could figure out what was done here, and I guess it was what, I don't want to waste another meeting and not pass this.
Ms. O'Donnell.
Mr. Chair, the excluded section, there are a few things that I would recommend be corrected when they get represented. The dollar amounts of the values from $1 to $500,000 is clear. From $500,001 to $1 million is clear. And then it goes from $1 million to $5 million. So it's not clear. And the same thing happens at $5 million and up, so you could be changing either or, and that should be corrected. And
Other discussion? Mr. Straight.
Through the chair, I have another question for staff along the lines of our discussion, if that's acceptable.
Nice and loud.
As you stated, you rolled back the fees since it was not approved by the three local groups. What about the section on adjustment for inflation? Is that intended to stay in the code, or is that intended to be rolled back as well? All right, in that case, we amend the... to be clear, section 2310, 104, 15.6, adjustment for inflation. adjust the fees from 2016 onwards as a measure of the cost, consumer price index for Anchorage.
Could you repeat the number?
Yes, please.
2310-104.
2310-104. Okay, excuse me?
Bottom of page 41.
Page 41.
Bottom of page 41. That was added, and that is also referenced in the letter staff put together discussing the fees. That was specifically, in at least one of the letters I saw, asked
Yes.
not to be included by the, I believe it was the housing, HBC.
Yes.
And per staff, that is no longer to be included as well, so I recommend an amendment to the motion.
Strike that.
I recommend an amendment to the motion to exclude that section 2310-104-15-6, adjustment for inflation.
I second.
I'm catching up. Okay, got a motion and a second to delete 2310-104.15.6. Yes, sir.
And your reasoning is?
Mr. McKee.
The reason is that there was no, all along the same lines as all the fees being rolled back. It was part of what staff had proposed, and it was part of what the local community had decided they did not want to have included, so staff has rolled that back as well.
Do you agree with that? What are you gonna do about inflation?
We'll deal with it in the group or talk about it and come back with these later. I mean,
Putting off the inevitable.
Fine. I mean, it's only fair, that's what we said we would do, and that's over and above the fees that are today. We'll discuss it in the group if that's a thing, and they'll come back sometime later to the building board at a later time. But right now, it's not fair to put that piece forward, because that's a piece that we're rolling back because it wasn't adopted by all three.
So they adopt your fees.
Well, I mean, when we do fees, and when we deal with fees, I mean, we should get the industry somewhat involved with it. If you know, we need to go in front of the assembly. And when you go in front of the assembly and make a public statement that we're moving forward and doing this, I mean, the industry that's affected by it should either feel like it's something that benefits them, or they get a service for that fee, or whatever it ends up being. They should get a service for it, and right now, it's just not at the stage that everybody is in agreement. So we'll go back to the table, and when the group gets together, if we discuss it and it comes forward for the long term, it'd be great, and we'd never have to discuss fees again. But at this point in time, we're not there, and I don't think that it's fair to accept this piece when we made a commitment to those entities that we would not accept any of the changes that we made. So I'm behind taking these out, and it's just fine to get it out. And we would have taken it out without that.
Other discussions? Mr. Hickle.
Yeah, I don't really like the idea of inflation. It's arbitrary. I'd rather have a board like this where people look at fees and adjust them as needed. They may be higher, they may be lower. But just arbitrarily go in and say, well, why do we have a fee increase? Well, we have this piece of paper that says we have to increase it. Maybe they didn't need it. Maybe they need more. But to have a document that forces an arbitrary fee increase is inappropriate.
This will be coming before us when we get the rewrite, so we can discuss that then. So right now, it's to remove.
So
Ms. O'Donnell.
Just to clarify, so the excluded tables will be represented and discussed at the next meeting,
At another meeting.
another meeting,
time.
another time.
Mr. Steele.
To keep things moving, I would suggest we act on the amendment to the motion that's before us, which is to remove 2310-104.15.6. Then we can talk about any other issues.
Okay, that's fine. That's good.
Call for vote. All in favor? Mr. Thompson?
Let me just clarify what Serena was saying. What this vote does, it adopts this code in a certain manner. I will edit it, we'll change it, we'll send it out to everybody, but we're not going to have another meeting on it because the decision will be made
Well, what I meant for is if you're gonna go through and amend table 3 dash whatever to increase those numbers later on, those are numbers you
Down
bring
the
to us
road,
then.
yes, but Serena, I think Serena was talking about this document coming back.
Just that portion. Yeah.
You'll get a copy of it before it goes to the assembly, and it'll be exactly what you adopt here tonight, and then, you'll have a chance to call us on if something doesn't look right.
Okay, regarding, deleting 2310.104.15.6. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Aye.
One against. Okay, so that is deleted. Now, we can go back to Mr. Steele's primary motion of accepting this document with the exceptions of the tables, although we will be keeping table 3E as edited. Is that a fair?
And there were two others. The
And
amendment we just acted on, and then on page 25.
Correct, removing the shower valve.
Valve.
Any additional discussion on that motion?
Question.
Mr. Feller?
The other item you mentioned that should be removed from the exception was drinking fountain. Did you intentionally leave that out?
It's a good point. I kind of moved over that. I think there would be two options, and so maybe it is appropriate to deal with drinking fountains as well, if consensus is there.
I'll just offer a friendly amendment to drinking fountain.
I'd like to address this. It's clear that if it's just to take the drinking fountain off and replace it at the same height, it's a replacement. But if you have to raise it, then it's a permit situation.
Then it's an alteration.
Yeah,
Yeah,
then it's an alteration.
if you're moving
So
it
this is
down,
just-
you're modifying
This
plumbing.
thing started spewing, leaking, the guy's coming in just to change it. So I don't see a problem with it. As is.
That's a good point. If you're changing the height, it's no longer a replacement, so it wouldn't be
Right,
the exception.
good point.
Withdraw my friendly amendment.
Thank you.
It's no longer friendly.
Any additional comments? Mr. McCain? McCann, excuse me.
You can't hear you. In the language, if you look at it, it says the alterated, it says the changing of the height. The gentleman just said if you raise it or lower, you're changing the height. If I heard it right, and if I did not hear it right, I apologize, if I can't hear it. I would really like to see us eliminate C all the way across now this second, because of the fee change will make it so much easier to pass it along to the consumer. I don't think you really understand where drinking fountains, it says like for like and all that. This will get so misconstrued that it's going to become a real problem, the way it's written here. I would really like to make a motion that we just, like right from the start, this is all I know. I explained that for 40 years, the problems that I see. I'm still working in the field. I'm not trying to be difficult. I would really like, and if I have to make a motion again, I'd like to make a motion that we just adopt everything else that the gentleman had suggested, except on, I'm going to make a motion on 2310. This is recorded, isn't it?
You'll have to speak up.
104, 102.4, section C. I would like to eliminate that whole section C.
McCann proposes to delete 2310.104.2.4. Is there a second?
C, just C.
C, excuse me, yes. Is there a second? Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of a second. I'm writing. additional discussions on the motion, on Mr. Steele's primary motion? Let's go with this, does everybody understand the motion on the table clearly? Do we need to repeat it again? Okay, so I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Is there any other new business? Mr. Thompson?
I just wanted to go over the changes that the mayor made a couple weeks ago in the Department of Permanent Development Center. About 2 weeks ago, he assigned a new building official. He's out of town, otherwise he would be here. His name is Bob Buell. You may recognize the name. He's been transit director, he's been traffic engineer, worked for the city many times. He's here as the building official and been working for a couple of weeks. At the same time that he appointed that, the mayor recommended or made official that development services, which is the entire department or the division of community development that's underneath Bob Knievel in that building official position. Actually, the entire reporting structure moved to Public Works and be under the Public Works Director, which is myself. So I just wanted to kind of tell you, so really what that does is it makes every bit of development, both vertical and horizontal, in the city, that the builders, developers, all of those scenarios come through one department now, which then they have the path to be able to go through the building side or through the municipal engineer side or through the traffic side, but all the way up to one director, which is me at Public Works. So I just wanted to kind of tell you the things that are going on. We are in the process. I turned the paperwork in to the mayor's office today with regard to the reorganization to do that. It's really minor. It's just really breaking the building department and private development out and putting it in underneath the Public Works. So it's a good setup. It's finally, really, truly will make a one-stop shop under one director rather than under multiple directors.
Question.
Mr. Steele?
What about land use planning? Has that got an entity of itself, or is that under Public Works now?
Planning, what you're talking about is probably zoning and planning, as well as long-range planning. Is that what you're talking about? Those remain, at this point in time, remain under Jerry Weaver in the Community Development Department.
Okay. So there still will be the interface, like, for example, if you have a conditional use or plating, that there'll still be that interface at the counter that has to deal with both sides.
Administrative site plan review of those pieces will stay under the Title 21 folks in community planning or community development.
Thank you.
Other reports? Hearing none, board member comments? Mr. Steele?
I'd just like to, again, state that tonight's interaction got a bit heated, and I apologize that I don't take the interaction personally, and I hope we can all walk away and not think of this in a negative light. I do feel that I also suffer from hearing loss, and it was difficult tonight, and I think that this is a situation that we should kind of try to plan in advance. I mean, I don't mind meeting out at the other place if it means we can hear better. And I know it's beyond your control, but I'm just saying that I think that added to a lot of it tonight. And I'd like to offer any apologies to anyone I might have offended in how I interacted, but don't take it personally.
I second that.
That being said,
Quick comment.
quick comment, Mr. Straight.
Just want to thank the building officials and Nos, Ron for being patient with us and doing what we asked, going through it. May have been confusing at times, but it was all here. I want to say thanks a lot for doing that for us, and it made it a lot more clear. Thanks.
I want to say that too. Thank you. It really does help understand and help explain it to people who haven't seen it before.
And as always, I would like to thank Ms. Clouder for taking care of us before and during these meetings. No, excuse me, I said it wrong. With that said, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved?
Second.
Moved and seconded, we stand adjourned. I thank you very much, and our next meeting will be to be announced.
Correct.